Just after midnight on August 5, 1962, one of Hollywood's most famous stars was spending another evening inside her home in Brentwood, Los Angeles. By sunrise, she would be dead. The news spread rapidly across the United States and soon around the world. The woman at the center of the story was Marilyn Monroe, a global celebrity whose image had become synonymous with Hollywood glamour. She was only 36 years old. What happened that night remains one of the most debated celebrity deaths in American history. According to official records, Monroe was found unresponsive in her bedroom during the early hours of August 5. Authorities later concluded that she died from acute barbiturate poisoning caused by an overdose of prescription sleeping medication. The death was officially classified as a probable suicide. For many people, that conclusion seemed straightforward. Monroe had struggled for years with insomnia, emotional distress, and dependence on prescription medications. She had also faced enormous pressure from fame, failed marriages, and professional setbacks. Yet almost immediately, questions began to emerge. Why did some witness accounts appear inconsistent? Why were there disagreements about the timeline of events inside the house? And why would the circumstances surrounding the death of one of the world's most recognizable women continue to generate debate decades later? It is important to separate fact from speculation. The facts are clear: Marilyn Monroe died on August 4 or early August 5, 1962, at her Brentwood home. Toxicology tests found lethal levels of barbiturates in her system. The official investigation concluded that her death was a probable suicide. Everything beyond those established findings enters a much more uncertain territory. Over the years, theories involving political figures, organized crime, government agencies, and people close to Monroe have all surfaced. Some are based on witness statements, while others rely on claims that remain unverified. To understand why so many questions still surround this case, we first need to understand the woman behind the legend. And that story begins long before the world knew her as Marilyn Monroe. Long before she became one of the most recognizable faces in the world, Marilyn Monroe was known as Norma Jean Baker. Her early life was marked by instability and uncertainty. Born in Los Angeles in 1926, Norma Jean spent much of her childhood moving between foster homes and temporary guardians. Her mother struggled with serious mental health issues and was unable to provide a stable home environment. As a result, the future Hollywood icon grew up searching for security and a sense of belonging. Those difficult experiences would leave a lasting impact on her life. As a teenager, Norma Jean married young, a decision that helped her avoid returning to an orphanage when her guardians relocated. During World War II, she worked in a defense factory, where a photographer noticed her potential as a model. That chance encounter changed everything. Modeling assignments quickly led to opportunities in Hollywood. Studio executives saw something unique in the young woman with the bright smile and camera-friendly presence. She dyed her hair blonde, adopted the stage name Marilyn Monroe, and began pursuing acting with remarkable determination. Success did not arrive overnight. Marilyn studied acting, singing, and performance techniques while working to establish herself in a highly competitive industry. By the early 1950s, her career was taking off. Films such as Gentlemen Prefer Blondes and How to Marry a Millionaire helped transform her into one of Hollywood's biggest stars. To the public, Marilyn represented beauty, confidence, and success. Her image appeared on magazine covers, movie posters, and television screens across America. But fame often hid a more complicated reality. Biographers and historians have documented that Monroe struggled with anxiety, insomnia, and periods of emotional distress. The demands of celebrity life, intense media attention, and personal disappointments frequently weighed heavily on her. Despite achieving extraordinary success, she continued searching for stability and happiness. As the 1950s came to an end, the gap between Marilyn Monroe's public image and private struggles would grow larger, and the pressures surrounding her life would become impossible to ignore. As Marilyn's fame reached unprecedented heights, so did her dependence on prescription medications. By the late 1950s, Marilyn Monroe had achieved what millions of people only dreamed about. She was one of Hollywood's highest-paid stars, recognized across the globe and admired by audiences everywhere. Her films generated enormous attention, and her image had become a symbol of American popular culture. From the outside, it appeared that she had everything, but behind the spotlight, Marilyn's life was becoming increasingly complicated. The pressures of maintaining her public image were relentless. Studios expected constant success. Reporters followed her every move. Personal struggles often became front-page news. Friends, biographers, and historians have described a woman who frequently battled anxiety, insecurity, and chronic insomnia. To cope with these challenges, Monroe increasingly relied on prescription medications. During that era, sleeping pills and sedatives were commonly prescribed in Hollywood, often with little understanding of the long-term risks. Doctors sometimes treated symptoms separately, leading patients to receive multiple medications at the same time. Marilyn was among those patients. At various points, she sought treatment for emotional difficulties and exhaustion. She also experienced several professional setbacks that added to her stress. Production delays, health issues, and conflicts with film studios occasionally damaged her reputation for reliability. Even though she remained a major box office attraction, her personal life brought additional challenges. Monroe's marriages to baseball legend Joe DiMaggio and playwright Arthur Miller both ended in divorce. She also suffered multiple pregnancy losses and never achieved her long-held dream of becoming a mother. Biographers have frequently cited these experiences as sources of deep emotional pain. By 1962, Marilyn was attempting to rebuild both her career and her personal life. She was discussing future projects, meeting with friends and advisors, and exploring new opportunities. These facts are important because they form the foundation of the official conclusion regarding her death. Investigators pointed to her documented emotional struggles, history of prescription drug use, and previous episodes involving medication as factors supporting the finding of probable suicide, yet not everyone accepted that explanation. As news of her death spread, attention quickly shifted from Marilyn's personal struggles to the events of her final day. Witnesses, visitors, phone calls, and conflicting timelines would soon become the focus of intense scrutiny. On August 4, 1962, Marilyn Monroe spent what would become the last full day of her life at her home in Brentwood, California. More than 60 years later, investigators, biographers, and researchers still examine the events of that day, hoping to better understand what happened in the hours before her death. While some details remain disputed, several key events are supported by witness statements and official records. According to accounts from people at the residence, Monroe began the day quietly. Reports indicate that she spent much of her time at home and made several phone calls. During the afternoon, she was visited by her psychiatrist, Dr. Ralph Greenson, who had been treating her during the final year of her life. Greenson's involvement in Monroe's life was significant. Historical records show that he had become one of her closest medical advisors, meeting with her frequently during the months leading up to her death. His treatment methods would later become a subject of debate, but there is no official finding that connected him to a crime. As evening approached, Monroe continued speaking with various contacts by telephone. Witness accounts place several people in communication with her throughout the day, though exact timelines vary depending on the source. This is where the case begins to grow more complicated. Some witness statements given in later years differed from earlier accounts. Certain individuals remembered events differently, while others changed portions of their stories over time. These inconsistencies fueled speculation and would eventually become a major reason why alternative theories gained traction. What remains undisputed is that concern about Monroe's condition eventually led people inside the home to seek help. According to the official account, Monroe was later found unresponsive in her bedroom. Medical personnel and authorities would soon be called to the scene, but one question continues to attract attention from researchers and investigators alike. If Marilyn Monroe died around the time estimated by medical examiners, why was there uncertainty surrounding exactly when the alarm was raised? That gap in the timeline would become one of the most discussed aspects of the entire case. In the early hours of August 5, 1962, concern inside Marilyn Monroe's Brentwood home turned into a tragedy. That would become one of Hollywood's most enduring mysteries. According to the official account, Monroe's housekeeper, Eunice Murray, became worried after noticing unusual circumstances involving Marilyn's bedroom. Unable to make contact with her, Murray alerted Dr. Ralph Greene's son, Monroe's psychiatrist. What happened next would later become the subject of intense scrutiny. By the time authorities arrived at the residence, Marilyn Monroe had been declared dead. The official investigation concluded that she died from acute barbiturate poisoning. Toxicology findings showed lethal levels of prescription sedatives in her system, supporting the ruling of probable suicide. From a medical standpoint, investigators believed the evidence pointed toward a fatal overdose. However, questions emerged almost immediately. One of the most debated issues involved the timeline. Over the years, various accounts provided by witnesses appeared to differ regarding exactly when Monroe was discovered and when calls for assistance were made. Some discrepancies may have resulted from the confusion and stress of the situation, while critics argued they raised legitimate concerns about the accuracy of the investigation. Another point frequently discussed was the condition of the scene itself. Reports indicated that numerous medication containers were found near Monroe's bed. Yet some investigators later questioned whether all aspects of the scene had been documented thoroughly. These concerns were amplified when certain individuals involved in the case recalled events differently in interviews conducted years later. It is important to separate established facts from speculation. Actually, Marilyn Monroe was found deceased in her bedroom, and the official investigation determined that her death resulted from a barbiturate overdose. Those findings remain the legal conclusion today. Theories suggesting that evidence was altered or concealed have never been proven in court. Nevertheless, the inconsistencies cited by critics have helped keep public interest in the case alive for decades. As investigators continued examining the evidence, attention soon shifted from the bedroom itself to the autopsy findings, and the question some experts believed still needed answers. Following Marilyn Monroe's death, the focus of the investigation shifted from the scene at her Brentwood home to the medical evidence. An autopsy was conducted, and toxicology testing revealed high concentrations of barbiturates in Monroe's system. Specifically, investigators found significant levels of nembutal and chloral hydrate, two powerful sedative medications commonly prescribed during that era. Based on those findings, the Los Angeles County Coroner's Office concluded that Monroe died from acute barbiturate poisoning. That conclusion remains the official explanation today. However, in the years that followed, some investigators, journalists, and medical experts raised questions about certain aspects of the case. These questions did not overturn the official findings, but they contributed to ongoing debate. One frequently discussed issue involved the method by which the drugs entered Monroe's body. Supporters of the official ruling argued that the toxicology results were consistent with a fatal overdose. Given Monroe's documented history of insomnia, prescription drug use, and emotional struggles, investigators believed the evidence supported their conclusion. Others pointed to details mentioned in later interviews by individuals connected to the case. Some questioned whether the amount of medication found in Monroe's system matched what would typically be expected from swallowing pills alone. These arguments led to alternative theories involving other possible methods of administration. It is important to note that none of these alternative explanations were ever proven. Another source of controversy involved the handling of evidence. Over the decades, reports emerged that certain materials connected to the autopsy, including some photographs and tissue samples, were unavailable or could not be located. Critics argued that missing evidence made it difficult to fully evaluate later claims. Supporters of the official findings countered that the available medical evidence was sufficient to support the original conclusion. As a result, two competing views developed. One side viewed the case as a tragic but explainable overdose. The other believed unanswered medical questions justified continued skepticism. More than 60 years later, neither side has fully convinced the other, and as medical debates continued, investigators began looking beyond the autopsy, to the people who surrounded Marilyn Monroe during the final months of her life. As questions about Marilyn Monroe's death continued to grow, attention increasingly shifted toward the people who had been closest to her during the final months of her life. Among the most discussed figures was Dr. Ralph Greene's son, Monroe's psychiatrist. By 1962, Greene's son had become deeply involved in Monroe's treatment. Historical records show that he saw her frequently and played a major role in her day-to-day support system. Some biographers have argued that his relationship with Monroe went beyond the boundaries normally expected between a psychiatrist and a patient. While there is evidence that his methods were unconventional, no official investigation ever concluded that he was responsible for her death. Nevertheless, his actions on the day Monroe died have remained a subject of debate. Another key figure was Eunice Murray, Monroe's housekeeper. Murray was present at the Brentwood residence during the crucial hours surrounding Monroe's death and was one of the first people to report that something was wrong. Over the years, critics focused on differences between some of Murray's statements regarding the timeline of events. Supporters of the official findings have argued that inconsistencies can occur when witnesses recall stressful events many years later. Others believe those contradictions deserve closer examination. Then there were Monroe's close friends, advisors, and associates. Several individuals reportedly communicated with her during her final day. As investigators and journalists revisited the case in later decades, differing recollections from witnesses added to the uncertainty surrounding the timeline. Some interviews conducted years after the event introduced new claims, while others contradicted previously documented accounts. Separating fact from allegation is essential. The fact is that numerous people connected to Monroe were questioned over the years. Allegations involving cover-ups, conspiracies, and coordinated efforts to hide the truth have circulated for decades. However, no criminal charges were ever filed against any individual in connection with Monroe's death, yet the speculation continued because another element of the story remained impossible to ignore: Marilyn Monroe's reported connections to some of the most powerful political figures in America. Those alleged relationships would eventually become the foundation for the most famous and controversial theories of all. No aspect of Marilyn Monroe's death has generated more speculation than her reported connections to the Kennedy family. More than 6 decades after her death, theories involving President John F. Kennedy and Attorney General Robert F. Kennedy remains among the most discussed elements of the case. But separating established facts from allegations is crucial. It is widely accepted by many historians and biographers that Marilyn Monroe and John F. Kennedy knew each other and moved within overlapping social circles. Monroe's famous performance of "Happy Birthday, Mr. President" at a May 1962 celebration in New York became one of the defining moments of her public life. Beyond that, many claims become far less certain. Over the years, numerous authors and researchers have alleged that Monroe had romantic relationships with both Kennedy brothers. Some witnesses claimed that Robert Kennedy visited Monroe on the day she died. Others disputed those accounts. Despite decades of investigation, no definitive evidence has emerged that conclusively proves many of the most dramatic allegations. What is clear is that these claims help fuel a growing belief that Monroe may have possessed sensitive information about powerful political figures. One frequently repeated story involves a so-called "red diary" that Monroe allegedly used to record personal conversations and private details. According to various theories, this diary contained information that could have embarrassed influential individuals. However, no such diary has ever been publicly produced or verified as evidence in any official investigation. Similarly, claims that Monroe threatened to expose political secrets remain largely based on witness recollections, second-hand accounts, and later interpretations rather than documented proof. This distinction is important. The fact is that Monroe's death occurred during a tense period in American history, with the Cold War dominating public attention. The theory is that political interests may have played a role in the events surrounding her death. Despite years of speculation, investigators never uncovered evidence sufficient to support a criminal case against any political figure. Yet because so many questions remain unresolved, the conspiracy theories never disappeared. Instead, they grew larger with each passing decade. More than 6 decades after Marilyn Monroe's death, one fact remains unchanged: the official findings have never been overturned. On August 5, 1962, the world lost one of its most recognizable stars. The Los Angeles County coroner concluded that Marilyn Monroe died from acute barbiturate poisoning and classified the manner of death as a probable suicide. Despite decades of debate, that remains the official determination today, yet the case has never truly faded from public attention. In the years following Monroe's death, journalists, authors, private investigators, and researchers continued to examine the evidence. Questions surrounding witness statements, the timeline of events, missing records, and conflicting recollections fueled ongoing speculation. As a result, numerous theories emerged, some focused on people within Monroe's inner circle. Others alleged involvement by political figures, organized crime, intelligence agencies, or combinations of all three. However, it is important to distinguish between allegations and established facts. The facts are clear: no criminal charges were ever filed against any individual in connection with Marilyn Monroe's death. Multiple reviews of the case failed to produce evidence sufficient to support a homicide prosecution. One of the most significant developments occurred in 1982, when the Los Angeles County District Attorney's Office conducted a review of the available evidence. After examining witness statements, investigative records, and forensic findings, officials concluded that there was no credible evidence of a murder conspiracy. The original ruling was allowed to stand. That does not mean every question was answered. Researchers continue to debate inconsistencies in witness accounts. Others point to records, materials, and personal documents that were reportedly lost, destroyed, or remain unavailable. These uncertainties ensure that new theories continue to appear even today. So where does the case stand in 2026? Legally, the matter is closed. Marilyn Monroe's death remains officially classified as a probable suicide caused by acute barbiturate poisoning. No government agency has announced plans to reopen the case, and no new evidence has emerged that has changed the official conclusion, but in the court of public opinion, the mystery remains alive. Perhaps that is why the story continues to fascinate people around the world. Was Marilyn Monroe's death exactly what investigators concluded in 1962? Or do the unanswered questions point to something that history has yet to fully uncover? More than 60 years later, the verdict stands, the debate continues, and the mystery of Marilyn Monroe endures.